Have you ever stopped to think that maybe some foods, the ones you've eaten forever, might affect your body differently as you get older?
Oh, absolutely. It's a really important thing to consider, especially past 60 when your metabolism just isn't quite the same machine it used to be.
Right. And it makes you look at everyday things, things you barely think about. Like, what if I told you one very common cheese, maybe even sitting in your fridge right now, is actually described in the sources we looked at as a stroke waiting to happen?
Wow.
Yeah. We are definitely going to reveal which cheese that is later in this deep dive, so you'll want to stick around for that one.
That's a pretty powerful warning from the material. It really shows how complex something seemingly simple like cheese can actually be.
Welcome, everyone, to the deep dive. Today, we're focusing on, well, cheese, something most of us eat pretty regularly. But we're looking at it from a specific angle, its impact on health, especially after you hit 60, an impact that often gets overlooked.
And our conversation today, it's based directly on this stack of sources you've provided. Articles, research, all focusing specifically on diet and health for seniors.
Exactly. So our mission here is to really dig into what these sources say. We want to figure out, based on this information, which cheeses get the green light and which ones, well, which ones you should probably steer clear of. It's all about making smarter choices.
And it's interesting, the source material itself frames some of this knowledge within what it calls the elder's way, sort of an approach that emphasizes making informed choices for aging gracefully.
Okay, so let's dive into the core problem layout in these sources. Right away, they make a pretty bold claim. A lot of doctors just aren't having these detailed cheese conversations with patients over 60.
That's a key point they raise. And they immediately follow it up with the potential downside. Picking the wrong kind of cheese, according to this material, could potentially increase your risk of heart disease by, get this, up to 40%.
40%. Just from cheese. That figure really jumps out at you. And the source links this specific number to what it calls a groundbreaking 2023 study from the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition. So it's not just a guess, they're citing research here.
Yeah, and that study, as the sources explain it, really gets into the how. It points the finger at the saturated fats in certain cheeses, saying they can trigger things like arterial blockages.
Which naturally leads to higher blood pressure.
Exactly, and the material even says it can increase the risk for those transient ischemic attacks, the mini strokes.
And it's not just about the heart, is it? The sources indicate that the wrong cheeses could potentially speed up mental decline, mess with your blood sugar balance, and even fuel chronic inflammation.
Which brings us back to that age factor.
Yeah.
Why is this such a big deal after 60? The sources are pretty clear. Your body just gets less efficient at processing fats and handling sodium as you age. What was no problem at 30 might be a real challenge at 65.
And here's a tricky part the sources highlight. A lot of these potentially harmful cheeses, they're often marketed as like gourmet or sophisticated, maybe even healthy.
That's right. That deceptive marketing makes it really hard to know what you're actually getting.
Yeah.
But, and this is important, the sources stress this isn't about ditching all cheese. Not at all. They shift to the positive, saying that if you know which ones to choose, certain cheeses can actually be protective, helping with digestion, cognition, even bone strength.
Okay, good. So let's focus on that positive side first. Based on these sources, there are 4 cheeses they really recommend for people over 60. These are the must-eats.
All right, let's get into that list.
Let's do it. Coming in at number 4 on this good list is actually something pretty simple, mozzarella.
But there's a key detail the sources add. They're talking specifically about fresh mozzarella or buffalo mozzarella,
Yeah.
not the low-moisture shredded kind.
Oh, okay. That makes sense. They emphasize its purity when it's fresh and it hasn't been heavily processed.
Yeah.
The softball's usually packed in water.
And that purity means real benefits for older adults. Good quality protein, significantly less sodium than many other cheeses, and relatively lower saturated fat content too.
The sources mention some research supporting this, including a 2022 study they cite from the European Journal of Nutrition. Apparently, it linked low-sodium cheeses like mozzarella to better blood vessel flexibility, super important for circulation, and maybe even fewer arthritis flare-ups.
And they connect that to its good calcium to sodium ratio and some natural anti-inflammatory properties. Plus, it tends to be easier to digest because it's lower in lactose, and you get key minerals like calcium, phosphorus, selenium.
They also give a specific shout-out to buffalo milk mozzarella, saying it's even higher in vitamin A, zinc, and certain antioxidants.
Interesting stuff. The sources also bring up things called bioactive peptides and conjugated linoleic acid, CLA, found in mozzarella. They suggest these might help with blood pressure, fat metabolism, and reducing inflammation.
And it's just so easy to use. Toss it in a salad, melt it on veggies, make a simple caprese. Lots of ways to get those benefits in.
Okay, moving to number 3 on the must-eat list. Feta cheese.
Now, this one might surprise some people because feta can be quite salty, right?
It definitely can be, but the
Hmm.
sources include it because when eaten in moderation, its overall profile has some unique pluses. It's usually made from sheep or goat milk, and the sources note that the protein structure can be gentler on digestion, plus it's lower in lactose.
Do on the stomach, okay.
Exactly. And beyond that, it packs a nutritional punch. Good calcium and protein, obviously, but it's particularly rich in vitamin B12. That's really key as we age because B12 absorption can decrease, and you need it for nerve health, bone density, muscle mass.
The sources also mention probiotics in feta supporting gut health. That's always important, but especially for digestion, immunity, and nutrient uptake in older adults.
And you know that strong, tangy flavor?
Yeah.
The sources actually see that as a positive for portion control. A little goes a long way, so you might eat less overall.
Oh, and they included a great practical tip. If the saltiness is a concern, just rinse the feta under cold water for a minute or so. Apparently, that can cut the sodium by up to 30%.
Simple trick. All right, number 2 on the good list is Swiss cheese.
Ah, the holy cheese.
Those very holes, made by bacteria during aging, are actually linked to some of the benefits the sources highlight.
But the most striking thing the sources emphasize about Swiss, especially for the over 60 crowd, is its sodium content. It's incredibly low.
Incredibly low. They give the number, just 54 milligrams per ounce. That's like 75% less sodium than most other aged cheeses. A massive advantage if you're watching blood pressure.
And it's naturally almost lactose-free because of the aging process.
Right. And the sources mention specific bacteria involved, particularly Propionibacterium fortinbras. They link these cultures to potential immune function benefits and also note they produce vitamin K2. K2 is vital for making sure calcium goes to your bones, not your arteries.
Good point. And Swiss is a great source of calcium itself, about 220 milligrams per ounce, plus nearly 8 grams of protein per ounce. That protein helps fight off age-related muscle loss, sarcopenia.
It's also loaded with vitamin B12, about 16% of your daily needs in just 1 ounce. Again, great for brain health.
The sources even nod to some recent studies suggesting its fatty acid profile might help lower inflammation markers.
Okay, and the number 1 cheese the sources say seniors should really embrace, goat cheese.
They're pretty enthusiastic about this one in the material, suggesting it should be a regular feature in the diet.
They describe it as really nutrient-dense, having potent anti-inflammatory properties, and being exceptionally easy to digest.
And why is it so easy to digest? The sources explain it's down to the fat structure. Goat cheese has more short and medium-chain fatty acids than cow's milk cheese. The body processes these more easily, so they're less likely to end up stored as fat.
It also generally contains less lactose and different casein proteins compared to cow's milk, which often cause digestive issues for people.
Plus, it's rich in things like beneficial probiotics, selenium, and zinc minerals that can sometimes be harder for older adults to get enough of.
And here's something really exciting the sources mention. Its potential role in brain health. They talk about omega-3s and a unique form of vitamin A, noting that current research is actually looking into whether it could help protect against Alzheimer's or slow cognitive decline.
That's significant. And they also point out that goat cheese often has a very clean ingredient list, usually just milk, cultures, salt, maybe enzymes, minimal processing.
Well, you can crumble it on salads, spread
Yeah.
it on crackers, mix it
Yeah.
into things. Very versatile, very beneficial according to these sources.
Okay, so that's the positive side, the cheeses to lean into now. We need to brace ourselves for the other list. The sources identify 4 cheeses they strongly advise avoiding, particularly after 60.
Right. This is where we get into those more concerning descriptions, including the one flagged as a strig waiting to happen.
Let's start with number 4 on the avoid list, American cheese.
Yeah, the sources are pretty blunt about this one. They state right out that it's not really cheese in the traditional sense, but a processed cheese product.
And the ingredients they call out as problematic. Things like emulsifiers, way too much salt, artificial colors, preservatives.
The sodium alone is quite telling. The sources mention that just one single slice can pack about 15% of your recommended daily sodium intake. That's a lot from one thin slice, especially if blood pressure is a concern.
And those emulsifiers they mentioned, according to the material, there's concern they might mess with your gut bacteria balance.
On top of that, the artificial phosphates used to make it melt so smoothly. The sources cite studies suggesting these can interfere with calcium absorption and potentially even speed up arterial calcification in older adults, basically hardening of the arteries.
So the takeaway from the source is pretty clear. The convenience just isn't worth the potential health risks.
Agreed. Number 3 on the avoid list, blue cheese.
Okay, this one feels kind of fancy, doesn't it? Like a gourmet choice.
Eh,
Surprising to see it on the never touch list.
It is surprising on the surface, but the sources build a specific case against it. The issue, they explain, stems from the penicillium mold used to create those blue veins. This mold produces compounds called tyramine and histamine.
Okay, tyramine and histamine. Why are they a problem, especially for older adults?
Well, the sources state that as we age, our body's ability to break down tyramine and histamine efficiently can decline. So these compounds can build up.
And what happens when they build up?
The sources cite a 2023 study in food chemistry that linked high tyramine intake in seniors to things like severe migraines, really dangerous spikes in blood pressure, and even irregular heart rhythms.
Wow, that sounds potentially serious.
It really can be. The sources describe scenarios where someone might feel dizzy or generally unwell, and it escalate to needing emergency care due to these effects. Plus, there's always a higher risk of listeria contamination with soft, aged cheeses like blue cheese, which is extra risky for seniors.
And the symptoms aren't always obvious. They can be kind of vague.
Exactly. The sources list things like heart palpitations, headaches, feeling flushed, chest tightness, maybe ringing in the ears, a sense of pressure. It could easily be mistaken for something else.
And on top of all that, blue cheese is notorious for its sodium content.
Oh, incredibly high. The sources say it's often over 400 milligrams per ounce, and some types have double that. That alone makes it a bad choice for anyone with kidney problems or high blood pressure.
So you've got the high sodium, the potential mold byproducts.
And often a high cream content, too, which adds to the saturated fat. The sources basically call it a perfect storm of risks for older bodies. They even suggest it might be the hidden culprit behind unexplained symptoms sometimes.
Okay, number 2 on the do not touch list, according to these sources, cream cheese.
Again, seems so harmless, right? Spread on a bagel, used in dips.
Yeah, it doesn't have that strong flavor or the visible mold of blue cheese.
But the sources paint a different picture, calling it a dangerous fat bomb. Why? Because it's packed with saturated fat, offers very little protein, is super calorie dense, and doesn't provide many nutrients. That combination really encourages fat storage, which is tougher to manage when metabolism slows down after 60.
And the sources flag a really serious risk here too, bacterial contamination, specifically listeria.
Yes. Because it's soft and has high moisture content, cream cheese is more prone to listeria growth. For seniors whose immune systems might be less robust, listeria isn't just a stomach bug. It can cause severe infections like blood poisoning or meningitis. These are genuine medical emergencies.
And leaving it out on the counter increases that risk, right?
Absolutely. Temperature control is critical. And the sources add another warning about flavored cream cheeses. They often contain a lot of added sugar, which creates another problem, spiking insulin, promoting more fat storage and increasing inflammation.
So high fat, possible added sugar, and a serious bacterial risk. The sources label it a triple threat that people often eat without realizing the potential dangers.
All right, now for the number 1 cheese, the sources warn you to avoid. The one they explicitly describe using that alarming phrase, a stroke waiting to happen. They're referring to processed cheese spreads.
Okay, so we're talking about the stuff in jars, tubs, maybe those foil-wrapped triangles?
Exactly that type of product. The sources are completely unambiguous here. They state this category is the absolute most dangerous cheese-like product for seniors.
Why is it considered so much worse than the others?
Because, according to the sources, these spreads basically concentrate the worst aspects. They have incredibly high sodium levels, excessive saturated fats, and this is key, a disturbing list of chemical additives.
And the way they're made is also a red flag.
Yes, the sources describe it as a toxic manufacturing process. They talk about chemical treatments, heavy emulsification, stabilizers, and they specifically focus on sodium phosphate additives.
Sodium phosphate, what's the specific danger there?
The sources express serious concern about sodium phosphates, linking them directly to potential kidney damage.
Kidney damage,
Yeah.
really?
They explain that these phosphate additives can put a significant strain on kidneys, potentially worsening existing kidney issues, which are more common with age. Over time, high intake could contribute to kidney disease progression.
And they actually cite research on this.
Yes, the sources mention studies, including research highlighted by the National Kidney Foundation, connecting these specific additives to declining kidney function.
And it doesn't stop with the kidneys, does it?
Unfortunately, no. Beyond the sodium, fat, and phosphates, the sources warn that some of these processed spreads might still contain trans fats or partially hydrogenated oils.
Yeah.
We know how bad those are. They raise your bad LDL cholesterol, lower your good HDL, and significantly increase heart attack and stroke risk.
It's strange because they seem so soft and smooth. Maybe you'd think they're lighter than hard cheese.
The sources specifically refute that idea, stating that nutritionally these spreads are far, far worse than natural cheeses.
And there's even a potential link to brain health mentioned for older adults.
Yes, the sources suggest the chemical additives and the inflammation they can cause might contribute to accelerating cognitive decline.
So based on everything in this material, this is the one product they say to cut out completely, immediately. They use really strong language calling it biologically aggressive.
Wow. So looking at the whole picture presented in these sources, it's really clear that cheese itself isn't the enemy as you get older.
Not at all. Actually, like we saw, if you make smart choices about which types, cheese can offer some real health advantages. The key really is wisdom, understanding which ones work for your body and which ones, according to this material, might be working against it.
So now we turn this deep dive over to you. Thinking about everything we've discussed from these sources, maybe take a moment. How many of those never-touched cheeses might be in your regular rotation right now?
And looking at that must-eat list, goat cheese, Swiss, feta, fresh mozzarella, have you thought about easy ways to swap those in for some of the less healthy options?
Just let yourself consider which insights from this discussion really hit home for you.
As the sources suggest, those seemingly small food choices can have a really big impact, especially in our later years. Choosing that wisdom over simple convenience. It's framed here as more than just diet. It's like an act of self-care.
For more deep dives like this one, where we explore the information found in various sources to help you better understand the world and make informed decisions.
Please make sure you subscribe or follow wherever you're listening.